Podcasts on UNCTV.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
Durham native David Gergen has worked in 4 presidential administrations and is now CNN's senior political analyst and chair of the Elon University School of Law Advisory Board. Mr. Gergen recently talked with Elon University President Leo Lambert to share his insights on the state and the country.
David Gergen, great son of North Carolina, welcome back.
It's good to be back at Elon.
It's good to have you at Elon, always. David, our country is facing some pretty serious domestic challenges today. Do you think that we have the collective will to solve these problems?
It's not clear, is it? I have felt for a long time that we were not taking the problem seriously. We kept kicking the can down the road. I retain a hope that America, if the problems become large enough and pressing enough, urgent enough, will respond. There was an economist who once said in Washington that Americans are not very good when we have termites in the basement, but we're very good when we have a wolf at the door. And I think that's sort of, I think we've seen that on several occasions. We respond well when we're under attack in 9/11. We respond well when there's a Katrina. People really want to help New Orleans. And there's a lot, people come together in those moments. Gabby Giffords gets shot, we all pull together. The energy crisis that's been creeping up on us, that goes back now almost 40 years. I was there in the White House, wrote some of the early speeches for President Nixon and President Ford, declaring that our goal was, and by golly, we're going to get there, is to make America energy independent. Energy independence was our vow. Well, at the time, we were about 30% dependent on oil. Today, we're about 60% dependent on oil. I'm very proud of what I've contributed to American public life through the speeches. But I think it's that, and unfortunately, is typical. It's not atypical. We've seen the same thing in public education. I was there in 1982, 83 when President Reagan got a report from a bipartisan commission that was the first to ring the alarm bells on the state of public education. Said there was a rising tide of mediocrity sweeping across our schools. So he went out and barnstormed the country for education reform. A whole lot of governors like Jim Hunt of North Carolina, Bill Clinton in Arkansas, Tommy Thompson in Wisconsin, John Engler in Michigan. They were Democrats and Republicans. They all went to the barricades for education reform. And here we are, Leo, where it's almost 30 years later, and we really haven't solved the problem. The dropout rate in some parts of the country is higher than it was then, and the scores, of course, internationally, competitively, we're plateaued, but our competitors, and we really have to, we have to see ourselves embedded in a global economy now. And our domestic challenges are within the context of a global economy. Our competitors on education are like streaking ahead of us.
You've been part of 4 presidential administrations. You've been watching Washington and Congress for 4 decades. How are leadership challenges in D.C. different today as compared to when you first arrived on the scene?
Well, one of the big differences to my way of thinking is that when I first arrived, that the people governing the country were what was called the World War II generation. They were largely men and women who had lived through the war, and most of them had served in uniform. We had 7 presidents in a row, from John Kennedy through George Bush Sr., 7 presidents in a row, all of whom wore a military uniform. 6 were in the war. Only Jimmy Carter, he was in the Naval Academy. The war ended while he was still there, and then he went on to serve honorably. And I think they brought a certain kind of philosophy and attitude toward public life, that of course they were strong Democrats, and of course they were strong Republicans, but they saw themselves as first and foremost strong Americans. And I think we have, with the passage of the World War II generation, they've left the stage by and large now. A new generation has come to power that does not share that sense of common sacrifice. Very few people in our generation sacrificed when they were young. They didn't have to do anything for the nation. And they don't have this overriding sense that the nation should come first, the well-being of the nation should come first.
Think about what's on President Obama's desk right now and the challenges before the president. Which of those challenges do you think has the greatest likelihood of developing into a serious crisis for the United States?
Well, I don't envy the president. I have a lot of sympathy for him, actually. He's had the biggest inbox of any president I can remember. You know, he just inherited a very rough set of problems. And then to top it off, he's had these new issues in the Middle East, and it's very complicated to figure out how to, when you've got so many countries that are in turmoil and you want to support the democratic forces, but yet you've got to be careful how you do it. You have to be sympathetic to him in that, and I think all of us want him to succeed, whether you agree or disagree. It's important for our presidents to succeed. But I think in the near term, I think there are two, I'd say, in terms of why the crises. The near-term crisis is we're slipping into a debt crisis. The national debt, there are a variety of studies that show that, particularly one that's well respected by Ken Rogoff and Carmen Reinhardt. Rogoff's at Harvard, Reinhardt's at she's at the University of Maryland. And they've looked at financial crises going back 700 years, and they make the argument, look, if you allow your total public debt, your total government debt, to exceed 90% of your GDP, or annual size of your economy, almost inevitably it slows down your economic growth. And we are now well over 100% in the United States. We've got only once in our, and since the records have been kept since 1916, have we ever gotten this high. And it's clearly, I think, dampening our economic growth, and it's going to get worse. And that's why I think, to me, the near-term issue is dealing with the debt. The long-term issue, and it goes back to education reform, we have to make sure our kids can compete in a 21st century economy. Other countries are taking this very, very seriously. One of the reasons we were such a powerful nation in the 20th century was we entered the 20th century as the most educated nation on earth. We had the highest percentage of people going to college of any nation on earth. And we maintained that lead right up until the 1970s. We've now dropped back to 15th or so. And you look at if you talk to Arne Duncan at the Department of Education, whom I think is doing a wonderful job for the country and for President Obama, and you look state by state and compare us to other countries. The state of Massachusetts has the highest performing state in the country right now in terms of schools, and yet if we compare it to other nations, we're 12th. Massachusetts would be 12th. And many of our states are far below that. I'm sad to say North Carolina is in the middle, and I do think one of the biggest challenges in North Carolina, given the fact we've got these wonderful universities here, we've got a very strong professional class here, we've got a very entrepreneurial community. I think the state has an enormous amount of promise, but critical to the future of North Carolina is dealing with K-12.
David Gergen, it's always a pleasure to have you at Elon.
Thank you.
Thanks for visiting with us today.
It's a privilege to be at Elon, Leo. Thank you.
Thank you.
Podcasts on UNC-TV.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.